Now, John answers, John says, no, I am not the Messiah. Then they said unto John, hey man, if you, John, if you are not the Christ, if you are not the prophet Elijah, if you are not the prophet that Moses talked about, then who in the world are you? And why are you out here baptizing and talking to people? Why did they ask him that? Because John the Baptist was not a Levite. John the Baptist was not a priest. John the Baptist was not alone, didn't come out of Aaron's seed. John the Baptist came out of the tribe of Judah. And they knew that. So he had no business doing what he was doing. So they were interrogating John the Baptist. Why? Because they were saying, you have no authority from the priest to do what you're doing, John. He says, they say, who are you that we may give an answer to those who sent us? What do you say about yourself? He said, I am the voice of the one crying in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord, as the prophet Isaiah said. Now those who were sent from the Pharisees, and they asked him, saying, why then, if you are not the Christ, Elijah, or the prophet, what in the world are you doing over here baptizing people? You have no right. That authority and right was given to the priesthood, to the Levites, and to Aaron's sons, not to you. You see? And they were right in that respect. But what did they do? They disregarded, totally disregarded what God had prophesied and said. John answered them, says, I baptize with water, but there stands one among you whom you do not know. It is he who is coming after me, is preferred before me, whose sandal strap I am not worthy to unleash. Now, why is this important? And why am I reading it to you? Because this is how the false prophet is going to set up the Jews. He's going to set up the Jews, not by baptizing them in water, friends. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is he's going to prepare the way for them to accept the Antichrist through lying signs and wonders. Let me show you. Watch what he does over here in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. All right. Do you not remember that when I was still with you, I told you these things? And now you know what is restraining, that he may be revealed. He is the Antichrist. In his own time, for the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he's taken out of the way. Now, watch this. When he goes away, when the Spirit of God moves back and stops restraining and takes the church and put the church up in heaven, what happened? The first thing that comes out in the world is this military political leader stands up. At the exact same time, something else is happening. This false prophet rises up in Israel. It's him who's doing what's going on here. Then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will consume with the breath of his mouth and destroy the brightness of his coming. The coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan. Now, what did we read over in Revelation 13? Satan is the dragon. And we see two individuals who are working with the power of the dragon. Not just the Antichrist, the false prophet as well. Now, it is him who's doing what? He is coming with all the natural power and signs and lying wonders, and with all unrighteous deception among those who perish. He's going to deceive these people so bad that they're going to worship an image of a man. The whole world, friends. Everybody who's not going to be saved. Everybody who's going to hell. Yes. When we read chapter 13 in Revelation, did it say anything about the Antichrist doing signs and miracles? No. Only person it mentioned about doing signs and miracles was the false prophet. So who is he doing these signs and miracles for? For Israel, friends. The rest of the world do not care about signs and wonders. They care about power. They care about authority. So this part is talking about the false prophet without even mentioning the false prophet. Let me prove it to you. Let's go back to what we read about the false prophet. So we see right there, he's going to come, this dragon, Satan, is going to come with what? Lying wonders and signs and all this stuff. Now look, when we talked about the Antichrist, what is he talking about? He's just talking about, he's a beast, a lion, a bear, he had horns and all this good stuff, right? And then he was wounded, and then he was a military, he made war, he speak great things against God, right? He rules for 42 months. He opened his mouth and blasphemed God. He was granted to make war against Christians and against the saints, Christians, and overcome them. He was given authority over people. He who forces people to worship him. Where's the signs and wonders? There are no signs and wonders. Antichrist does none of that. All right. Now we get to the false prophet. He comes and he's a religious guy, but he speaks like a dragon. He exercises all of the authority of the first beast in his presence. Now watch. He causes the earth and those who dwell on it to worship them, the beast, whose deadly wound was healed. He, who? The false prophet, performs great signs. He makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. Elijah did that. Elijah did that, friends. And he deceived those who dwell on the earth. How? By signs that he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, in telling the people. He was granted power to give breath. Where did we read that? Giving breath. We read that over in Genesis chapter 2. Who gave breath? God gave breath. The Spirit of God breathed the breath of life into the nostrils of a human. The devil turns around through this false prophet, and he does the exact same thing that God did over in Genesis 2 and 7. He turns around and he gives life to an idol, pretending to copy every single thing that God is doing, friends. Can you see it? He made the image of the beast essentially come to life. Satan comes up with a false resurrection of the Antichrist and a false body, false human, to pretend like he's given life like God. But everything's a lie. Everything's false. So you see who's right here doing all the false miracles. So when Paul is talking here in 2 Thessalonians, who is he talking about? Huh? Who's he talking about? Is he talking about the Antichrist doing signs? No, friend. God just don't mention the fact that there's a second person. But he does tell us about it over in Revelation chapter 13. That's why I tell you over and over again, you have to read the whole book and you have to read it with understanding. Because if you just read this by itself and you didn't remember, if you read Revelation 13, if you didn't remember that the Antichrist didn't do this, that the false prophet did, you would never connect the false prophet to these power, signs, and lying wonders. You would be attributing that to the Antichrist, and that won't be correct. You see how subtle this is? To make a simple mistake like that, and you run with that, and everything that you read after that becomes a false truth, becomes a lie, friends. And you start building on that incorrect understanding of one verse, and what happens? It turns the Bible inside out. So that's the Antichrist. That's the Antichrist and the false prophet. And he causes them because they did not listen. So what happens? These people get their satisfaction from the signs and the lying wonders. And they become deceived by these things. And that deception is going to lead to them going to hell. Now, it's not the cause of them going to hell. The cause of them going to hell is the fact that they were born into sin. The deception is that there are going to be people preaching the gospel during this time, and they won't believe the gospel. This right here, the power, the signs, and the lying wonders, is going to be to keep these people from believing the truth of the gospel that the 144,000 Jews is going to preach, the gospel angel is going to preach, and the two witnesses in Jerusalem is going to preach. That's what these false signs and wonders are for. Why? Because they did not receive. Why didn't they receive? They didn't receive it because they are dead. Dead people do not have the power to give themselves life so that they can believe. What did John 1 says? God says, in him was life, and this life brings light to men. Okay? That's what the scriptures teach. Death brings only darkness. So there's no light. And they can't receive. The Bible says, to them, God gave the power to receive his word. That's also in John chapter 1. All right. They don't receive what? The love of the truth of God's word, the gospel. Why? Because it's the only power of God that they might be saved. So you see what's going on here? What's the whole point behind the false prophet coming? The whole point behind the false prophet is deception. Deception. Deception for a lost world and deception for the Jews. The Antichrist, though, is for the Jews alone. All right, friends. So let's go back and wrap this up. In the end, this deception proves one thing. Watch. And for this reason, what reason? That these people do not receive the love of the truth. The reason God is about to do what he's going to say. And for this reason, that they don't love the truth, look, God will send them strong delusions. What is this strong delusion stuff? That's this stuff right here. the lying wonders, signs, and false powers. That they should believe something. The gospel know that they may believe a lie. Why in the world would God do that? That they may all be condemned. Why would God want that? Because they didn't believe the truth. But they had pleasure, you see? They had pleasure in sin. That's the problem. Men love darkness rather than light, and they won't come to the light lest their deeds be exposed. That's what Jesus said. All right, friends. Let's wrap up tonight. We were talking about Elijah and the questions that they were asking, and I read all this study straight from the Bible. So we're going to come back, and I'm going to pick up on this Elijah thing again, right? And we're going to talk about the disciples and the confusion that they had concerning the things that the Pharisees taught them or the priests taught them. It's basically the same thing. And this is how the entire nation, became deceived by these priests and these false prophets, friends. This is amazing. But we're going to put it all together, and we're going to show you why the false prophet is actually necessary for the plan of God. All right, friends. Till next time. Take care.